to GRC Chat. Today our guest is Shubh Sinha. I'm very happy to have you here today, Shubh. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Likewise. So before we jump into our topic for today, can you shortly introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Shubh Sinha. I'm a co-founder and the CEO here at Integral. I like to say Integral is the integration layer for large enterprises looking to work with consumer data. And the end use cases are usually around marketing analytics, deep customer insights. I think the big belief here at Integral is that there's very high quality, very personalized insights and very regulated consumer data sets. So if you think about our pharmacy data, our geographic data, et cetera, but you want to use it compliantly because patient privacy and consumer privacy is, of course, very important to build that trust. So I think you can use it compliantly, quickly, and everybody wins. And that's kind of the ethos here at Integral. My background is a mix of product and software engineering, mainly in the consumer data world. And so I definitely feel like I've been kind of in this industry for a while and seen quite a few of the shifts. So yeah, excited to chat more about some of that today.
Excellent. So thank you for sharing. So what we are talking about today specifically.
I think what would be very important to discuss would be the idea around how consumer data is managed, but also the kind of like the intricacies of compliance and privacy there. I think people tend to think about them as separate, but if people like you and me, we there's a natural kind of like temperature in the environment, specifically in the US, where consumers are worried about their data privacy, but I don't think they realize that that has not necessarily just to do with how data is collected, but actually how it's used. The classic example I like to give is that most people hate ads, but if it's an ad for something you need right when you need it, it's usually actually pretty handy in a way. And I don't think people realize like consumer data management and kind of I'll say the boring or the not sexy stuff that happens in that world actually has a direct implication on real life outcomes. And just to take that ad example a little further, when you hear about a prescription because you have some sort of rare disease, because of a targeted ad, that's actually an example of it working relatively well. That being said, there's a big breakdown in how people think about it today versus how enterprises are handling it. And so, that I think is always a burning topic of discussion and kind of takes what we do in the back end, so to speak, because consumers don't see our software, but actually brings it to the front, to the forefront. Because if we do our jobs right, there's more happy outcomes with consumer data rather than breaches and some of the bad stuff that maybe has been in the press lately.
Thank you. I think it's also indeed very interesting and like a burning topic, as you have mentioned. So, well, let's get more deeper into it. So, can you explain what expert determination is and why it may be better suited for, like certain types of data?
Yeah, definitely. So consumer data management and privacy, there's tons of both state regulations and federal regulations that are set up to make sure that consumer data is managed in a safe, sensitive, and compliant way. So expert determination is one of the many frameworks or one of the many ways that the the privacy laws are kind of carrying through that sensibility and that sense of security. So you kind of think about it like almost like a type of lock in a way on a house. And so all that to say, a lock is useful because it not only locks the data or it locks what's underlying, but it also should be easy to open for the person with the key. Otherwise, you're kind of locking out the right person, so to speak. And so expert determination is specifically it's a policy within HIPAA, the federal healthcare standard. And what it outlines is that a specific set of data must be below a certain set of risk thresholds to be permissible for use. And so if you think about like an ad campaign or running analytics on some sort of product survey, and it has very sensitive healthcare data within it, the rule for expert determination says as long as the risk is below a certain threshold, you're good to use it. The opposite of expert determination, or maybe the counterbalance here, is safe harbor, which again is just another policy. But you could think about it almost as like a very secure lock that also does not let in the right people at times. And so safe harbor is like a very destructive, but very, I would say like almost like a bulldozer to your data, where it takes out it takes out what it needs to, but oftentimes it's not useful. And if you kind of think about the handshake between data and privacy, it should be useful and safe. Otherwise, consumers don't get the benefit, enterprises don't get the benefit. It's kind of a lose-lose. So back to expert determination, the reason it's good for data sets is because it allows for risk contouring. Not all use cases are the same. And so what expert determination does is provide a flexible a flexible configuration for data sets such that you can squeeze out more value from certain types of data sets than others. The end value here is typically that data scientists can get more value out of the data set as opposed to seeing a static uh, data that has really no value in it. So all this to say, it's not that it's softer, it's just more contoured risk such that you can actually allow for more data elements to get through while still maintaining compliance and security. And the end goal is more bespoke analysis, more bespoke ad campaigns, more bespoke research, whatever the end use case might be. It just allows it to be more efficacy at the end of the day compared to other more traditional conservative frameworks.
Thank you. And I've saw a statistic that claimed that 93% of all organizations are unknowingly putting sensitive data at risk. So how is this possible? Like, what is happening there?
Yeah, and I think this has to do with probably the overall temperature towards compliance and privacy, where it's usually seen as a checkbox. And so, in many ways, you can do something on paper that is right, but either what's on paper is not keeping up with what is in reality. And so, even though you think you've secured something, you haven't, you just checked a box. Or the other side of it is uh, check the box, you even maybe go the extra mile, but your partners and your data vendors, your partners, your vendors that maybe don't even necessarily know they have access to the data are not necessarily doing the same. And so in a way that 93%, I'm sure there's a ton of people who are involved in those organizations who think they're doing the right thing and they probably are doing the right thing in accordance with their policies. But then those policies, we work with some of the biggest companies in the world. Those policies are ever changing. And so the companies that are on the proactive side of that, I think they notice, oh, wow, there's actually a lot of security left on the table that we're not doing. And so we should use Integral to do that. Or other organizations, some of who have been in the news, they realize what is kind of exposed only after the fact that it happens. And so I guess the right way to say is that 93%, I think people, they think they're doing a good job. They probably are doing a good job in accordance with policies. The difference, though, is that those policies themselves are not necessarily up to date or covering what they should. And so there's a lot more going on underneath the surface. And we only hear about it through some of the big breaches and some of the big press releases that come out. But for every one that comes out, there's just another probably 100 sitting there in a way. And it's not to anybody's fault. It's just the fact that innovation, maybe on the side of the people who are looking to penetrate security or overcome security, is moving faster than the security side itself.
Mm. Thank you. I do have like one last kind of like a follow-up question. So, what are some common roadblocks that organizations are facing when it comes to data compliance?
Yeah, I would say the number one roadblock that we see is the fact that data and compliance are treated separately when they should be together, right? Everybody's semi-familiar with the data stack. It's like data scientists, data engineers, and all the other technical roles involved. And then there's almost this compliance stack where, it's the people you don't necessarily want to loop in until you have to. It's the analysts, it's the GRC folks, it's all the folks who are doing a very meaningful part, but they're almost treated as a separate part of the house. I think what we've noticed is that Integral's value premise in many ways is linking the stacks together. So both of them are in sync. But that wasn't always so obvious, especially when we were teaching people that they should be in sync. Like the data people didn't want to bring in the security people until they really had to. And so in the spirit of the checkbox, the big roadblock is that things should be happening in parallel between data and security groups, but they're not. And that has a very real outcome, especially for our customer segment, which is the global or the Fortune 2000, these massive enterprises where if they have even a single lapse in judgment or single lapse in security, it's millions, if not billions, in fines and just consumer data and trust is lost. And so I would say the number one roadblock is that compliance and data stacks are seen as separate when they should in fact be linked. And then, you bring in the tailwinds of AI and some of these other technology innovations that leverage data. At that point, in the room when they're talking about leveraging AI, there's not a security person saying like, hey, how do we do this very quickly, but also make sure that we don't necessarily leave ourselves open to exposure. The security person kind of comes in at the end is seen as like a roadblock in a way. And so that's just a fundamental example of how, if you rework that, you can eliminate that roadblock and move relatively quickly. So amongst the other roadblocks, that's the most sizable I've seen.
Thank you so much. So I have one, well, I'm technically done with my questions, but I want to ask if there is anything else you'd like to add.
I think that covers it. I tried to squeeze it all into the questions. So,
All right, excellent. So, well then, thank you so much, Shub, today for joining us. And, speaking about this, I think we do not hear often about, this, insight or like this angle of, yeah, this topic essentially. So thank you so much.
thank you.